I'm Carlos Fernandez, Policy Analyst at the Vegas Chamber. I'd like to thank you all for tuning into the Disaster Assistance Resources Call with the Small Business Administration District Director, Joe Amato, and with the Vegas Chamber President and CEO, Mary Beth Sewald. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to explain some features of this call. In order to preserve high sound quality, everyone on the call will be muted besides our presenters to make it easier for everyone to hear. If you'd like to ask questions, there are a few ways you could do so. If you're joining this call on the web or through the mobile app, you can ask a question by using the chat feature on the interface. We will ask your question on your behalf. You can also ask a question by clicking the raise hand button on the interface. We'll call your name and unmute your line so you can ask your question. Once you have asked your question, we will remute your line so everyone on the call can hear the answer. In order to preserve time, we ask that you please keep questions brief. We'll be taking all questions at the end of the call. Now, please welcome the Vegas Chamber's President and CEO, Mary Beth Sewald, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Carlos, and good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you so much for joining our call today. I'm happy to welcome chambers from across the entire state, from Reno and Boulder City to the urban and Asian chambers here in Las Vegas, along with our statewide trade associations and nonprofits. This is a very important call, so we're pleased to be able to offer it to all of our friends. As my friend Scott says from the Henderson Chamber, we're all in this together. It's a virtual solidarity during these challenging times. And so we were also informed this morning that the SBC administrator has signed the declaration of disaster for Nevada, and that allows the SBA to start processing those online economic injury disaster loan applications for small businesses throughout the entire state. So that's good news. Now, everybody, without any further ado, I'm pleased to welcome SBA District Director Joe Amato. He's going to give us firsthand guidance on disaster assistance loans that are now available through the SBA, along with a tutorial on navigating through these services, and then we'll have some time for Q&A after Joe's finished. Thank you again, and welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you very much for putting together this opportunity to speak to your small business members that obviously are part of every chamber. We think this is a great catalyst for us to get the information out there, and we are working very hard, especially in the last 4 or 5 days, to sort of set the platform, not only to get Nevada certified as a disaster relief state, with the great work and help of the governor's office and players throughout the state, but also through what we're trying to do on the national federal level through the Small Business Administration, to our ODA, or Office of Disaster Assistance, which is in Sacramento, who will be processing all the loan applications, and all the other stakeholders, both statewide and through the chamber network, in order to get us to the point where we can get the information out there to get people what they need, what they require to basically stay operational, or to support them during this economic what we call as economic disaster at this point. So contrary to where disaster loan programs that have been instituted in the past, most of the time, or almost every time that I can remember, would be a natural disaster where there's either a tornado, a hurricane, or a flood that creates a situation where businesses are affected. I'm not sure anyone else has ever seen an economic disaster, or as we're calling this, an economic injury disaster loan program at this level where businesses are affected at such a large scale. And what we're trying to do, and what we've been working on in most likely the last 72 hours for sure, was basically getting the information out there. And this is an amazingly great platform to do that. In fact, when this first started coming to fruition, I reached out to every chamber group I could locally in Southern Nevada, and then with the help of the Metro Chamber and the Latin Chamber and Urban Chamber and Asian Chamber, we were able to expand that to a statewide chamber network, which has been invaluable to us. For the businesses that you are dealing with during the disaster loan program, there is the opportunity to secure a disaster loan from the SBA directly. So normally the SBA works through the banking industry, through the lending industry, where the lender provides the funds and the SBA normally guarantees or participates in the lending. When the disaster loan program comes into effect, it's basically taking a look at each individual application as the SBA directly funds those projects. And so it sort of takes out the lending community per se, because the loans are funded directly through the federal government. In the application process, which I'm going through for the first time, I've not ever dealt with a disaster loan before, and definitely not an economic injury loan. It is a pretty seamless process. Anyone that is looking to get to apply for an SBA disaster loan would go on sba.gov/disaster. And that's very important that you use disaster as sort of your call for getting this application, because there are other SBA sites and they are not tied to the disaster declaration that was just approved this morning. And you would be told that your county or your area is not participating in the other programs that may be available to you. If you go on sba.gov/disaster, it will take you right to the website, disaster loan assistance website. And I just went through it with for the first time with sitting with a constituent this morning to see how it actually works, because to me that's important. Most of the questions I've been getting, of the hundreds of questions I've gotten between yesterday and today, and especially today since the application process went live, is, how does this work? How do I answer these questions? How do I get the dynamics of the application put together? So I'm trying to, and we're going to try to do it with our staff as well, try to get you as much hands-on information as we can in discussing and actually the application process. In every instance where you're a small business, a for-profit business, the size standards still come to effect, but in my view, mostly everybody we're going to be talking to, as long as you're not a publicly traded company, you're most likely going to be eligible for assistance. Now, the criteria for SBA disaster loans are pretty similar to the normal SBA process. I mean, you need to have a explainable credit history. If you don't have an excellent credit history, you need to have an explainable one. Most of the time, there could be issues having to do with medical or marital or some other instance where there may be a glitch in your credit. But again, as long as it's explainable, I think that it will pass muster. You need to have repayment ability. So in most cases, loans up to $2 million will be available per business. That's an awfully large number, and I'll explain to you a little bit later how to come about what you should ask for. So you're going to have repayment ability somewhere through the process, and I explain to you the terms. They try to keep the payments very low. They try to extend the term as long as possible. So, but again, you still have to have repayment ability. And the final is, if there is collateral available, understand as a small business owner, the SBA is going to use or take whatever collateral they can. If collateral is not available, they're not going to decline the loan. But as part of the federal process of lending money, if there is collateral available, you're going to have to share that collateral with the SBA until the loan is repaid. So to give you an idea, I think I had mentioned already, up to $2 million is available per business. The term can extend all the way to 30 years. So just in case in point, if you are a business that's eligible for $2 million, that payment will be on a 30-year amortization about $9,000 a month. That's like a regular mortgage payment, because the rate is fixed at 3.75%. If by chance you're a nonprofit seeking disaster loan assistance for economic injury, your loan rate will be 2.25%. And that is also a fixed rate. So how do they determine what the term is? It really depends on what the loan amount is. How do you determine what your loan amount should be? Well, when you go through the process of filling out your application, it's going to ask you a lot of questions about your business, about your ownership, about the needs of the business. What are your liabilities? I've sort of explained it this way in talking to ODA, and they liked this explanation a lot better than their own. If anybody understands what burn rate is, it's how much money your company burns each month to stay operational. So if you're looking at what can be used for proceeds, you look at things like, what debt obligations do you have? That includes SBA loan obligations you may already have. What kind of obligations do you have to third parties, to lending institutions that are automatic obligations that cannot be abated or cannot be deferred? Take a look at your leases, your rents. All those may add up to, say, $10,000 a month, okay? And then you look at what critical employees you need to either maintain your operation or to keep your operation ready for when recovery begins. So say that's another $10,000 a month that you have to maintain. And then you have to look at other obligations that can't be deferred, abated, negotiated, that also need to keep your business operational if you are still able to gain income, but not necessarily gain income at the same level you were before the economic disaster. So say that's another $10,000. So at this point, you have $30,000 in fixed obligations that you need to maintain your business and to keep it operational and prepared for when recovery begins. When I first looked at this, I was basically saying, for all intents and purposes, 3 to 6 months should be sufficient for a business to look at it. So you say 6 months at $30,000, you're basically asking for $180,000 in disaster loan funds. When I talked to ODA, the Office of Disaster Assistance, they said that a small business can ask for as many as 12 months in anticipation. So in this case, instead of $30,000 in 6 months, you take $30,000 in 12 months, you'd be asking for $360,000 in loan assistance. That's pretty much the science behind how they're going to figure out what are your liabilities. There's a section in the application that asks specifically what liabilities do you need to cover. You have to be precise, you have to be exact, and by doing so, they're going to help you come up with a calculation of what you should be asking for. At the end of the day, it's a disaster loan, it has to be repaid. But the whole idea behind the SBA disaster loan program is to put your business into a position where you can stabilize operations, where you can basically prepare yourself for recovery and then sort of support yourself until recovery takes place at 100%. Now, another part of the application process, they're going to ask about your historic income. What's your historic revenues? And they basically go back as far as 3 years and break it down January to December. Do you make $100,000 a month each month? Do you have a seasonal business? Is there cyclical nature to your business? You're going to share all that information with them. And what I've been sharing with most of the businesses I've talked to is after you do your 3 years of analysis, in most cases, most businesses have a pretty good set understanding what their cycles are, when they make the most money, when they make the least. The SBA wants to see that because they're going to try to help determine how much money you will really need in spite of the fact that, you're not making that revenue. Obviously, January and February this year, you have exact numbers. March, you're going to have an estimate, and you can truly estimate the rest of the year to see what you think your income is going to be as well in this one form. That will give, I'm talking to businesses that have actually shut their doors. So their revenue for April, May, June could be zero. And their revenue for the rest of March could be zero. Their revenue for just April could be zero, and then start seeing recovery in May. These are going to be estimates because we don't know. We're hopeful that this is a couple of weeks of where the shutdown is only effective for a couple of weeks, and that we start recovery in April. We hope in the best of all worlds that's what happens. But if it doesn't, we should be prepared if it doesn't for May. The disaster loan is not going to be a crystal ball, so you err on the side of caution. You ask for what you think you need for the balance of the year. That's what I would say is the best case scenario, up to but not exceeding $2 million, obviously. If you're a $30 million company and you're looking for the maximum, it probably is both discernible and allowable. If you're a company making less than $1 million a year, it's probably going to be a lesser amount. You have to be reasonable. It's if you do not ask for the full amount, so say you say I'm going to ask for $250 because I've got a burn rate of about $22,000 a month, and say the period extends far longer than anybody imagined, which I hope is not the case. I did ask the ODA, and they said you can go back to and reapply or add to the loan that you got originally, as long as it doesn't exceed $2 million. For those who do have, and in final thought, for those who do have SBA loans already, understand there's a ceiling in your normal SBA loan program of $5 million. If you are looking for, and if you are near that cap, or if you already have a $5 million loan out with the SBA, this is a total separate fund. You can still ask for SBA money even if you are at the cap already with other SBA loans. It's a whole separate pool of money. It's a whole separate allocation. So even if you have an SBA loan now, you will not be penalized from getting disaster loan relief. So in a nutshell, I think I've covered most of the bases of how this program is working, what we're trying to do, how to apply, how to get online access. Almost every loan at this point in time is going to be processed through the Sacramento office of the Office of Disaster Assistance. We are now working right now to supplement the personnel in that office. Normally in a natural disaster, small business normally does not take down a lot of business loans. They either have business interruption insurance that takes care of things, or they have other areas that they can go to get funding. We are very much alerted. We have alerted both Washington and the Disaster Loan Center that we think that this is going to be not hundreds, but probably thousands of loan applications in just maybe the state of Nevada alone. The other thing I just want to put in there is that if you are a small business, I mean very small, and you need only say $25,000 or less, the $25,000 loan goes through the application process. You will basically be approved, and I'll get back to this as well, the timing. My understanding is you get approved most quickly and efficiently, and all that is required is the signature. So there's no other documentation if it's $25,000 or less. $25,000 or more, there is documentation like your tax returns, personal financial statements, and other supporting documents that the SBA may require in order to finalize the loan. The last thing, I guess, is the timing. We've been told that from application to funding is going to take between 2 to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks is a lot of time for a business that's closed its doors. 2 to 3 weeks is a long time for anyone, and I more than sympathize with that. But that's what we were told. That contrary to the normal banking process that could take months, that they're saying that between application to funding will be inside of 2 to 3 weeks. So I think that's I guess the basics of everything I wanted to share at this point, and I'm more than happy to entertain every and all questions.
Thank you so much, Joe. We have a lot of questions here that we're getting, and we also have Director Brown on the line as well, and I think he's going to dial in to speak and add to the program. Director Brown, are you there yet?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So state government where Windows 7 still lives on. So yes, I'm here. Thank you, Joe. That was very good.
Oh, you're welcome very much.
Let's go to the questions.
Okay. How soon can we apply for the disaster relief loan? And I think that's immediately. It's up and running. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes, the website is up and running as of this morning. There is some lag, we've heard. We just begged Washington to add some more bandwidth to the program because it's getting inundated. So yes, it is active. Again, sba.gov/disaster. Make sure you're on that. When it opens up the page, it says that disaster loan assistance, SBA disaster loan assistance. And just make sure you see almost immediately it says something about economic injury. That is what you're going to be pursuing, a disaster loan for economic injury. So yes.
Okay, another question from Dean Pardee at Fortress Innovations. Does this program apply to new startups who have been trying to garner traction and revenue? We have several new projects that have been hindered by recent events. Labor, materials, supplies, and machinery needs have been impeded.
I believe it's available to all small businesses that are for profit. I believe that even if you're a startup with only a few months or a month of activity, that you can apply. We sort of were told by ODA, do not hesitate to apply. If there's an issue, they'll work with you to try to figure out a way to mitigate that issue. But for all intents and purposes, the case managers that are going to be assigned to cases that don't get in automatic approval, we're going to try to find a way to say yes.
Okay, next question. Can you get pre-approved and use when needed? Is there a time frame the loan must be used?
That's a good question. I have no idea. I would imagine that anyone that files an application and gets approved, those funds will be available immediately. When they take down those funds, that'd be very interesting to know. I'm not quite sure of that answer, but I'm writing it down. to get it and maybe get it back out to the people after that.
Okay, thank you. What if you have more than one business affected? Can you have a loan for each business?
I think because of the concentration rule, I mean, if you are the owner of several businesses, because and you're 20% or greater owner in several businesses, the rule, as I understand it, it's $2 million per business, but then there's the affiliation rule. If you own more than one business, I think you as an individual cannot be participating in more than $2 million in any stretch of businesses, whether it's cooperatively or collectively.
Okay. Should a business seek a loan to keep their employees covered on health benefits?
My understanding is you can use the money for any fixed liabilities. You can use it for payroll and benefits. So yes.
Okay. If a company just processed a loan with very high interest rates, can the SBA loan be used to pay off that high interest loan plus get extra capital to operate the business?
Absolutely not. You cannot use disaster loan proceeds to pay off any other loan. But what you can do, and I did reach out to the banking community, is that you can use disaster loan funds to pay the monthly payment, but you cannot use disaster loan funds to pay off the loan.
Okay. If you qualify for the whole $2 million and you don't use it, is there a prepayment penalty for early payoff?
There is no prepayment penalty whatsoever. If you borrow $2 million and all of a sudden, because glorious things happen and this thing is done and over with in 23 days, I'm only speaking hypothetically, and you don't need it, yes, you basically, my understanding is you don't take it down or you reverse it and pay it back. There is no prepayment penalty.
Okay. Are disaster loans available to public companies? And if not, why not?
Publicly traded companies are in a completely different financial platform than privately owned companies. Publicly traded companies have the ability to raise capital and credit instruments elsewhere. That is a huge indicator for small businesses that they do not have that. So no, publicly traded companies are not eligible whatsoever for SBA loan or disaster loan assistance.
Okay. Would collateral include 401ks?
It's most of the time it's tangible collateral and or liquid collateral. 401ks are not considered liquid because you have to take them down with a penalty. So my understanding in the many years I've been involved in lending in general, that the 401ks are not specifically used as collateral.
Okay, here's a good one. We just tried applying online, and it says there is not active declaration for Clark County, Nevada.
They're on the wrong website. It's plain and simple. And we did that. And so when I first sat with this client, with this constituent here and went through the process, we kept on going in and kept on saying there's no declaration. You have to go on sba.gov/disaster. If you go on there, the first page you'll see is disaster loan assistance. And you'll know when you're on the website. And it basically gives you three little, if I remember correctly, there are three little areas. One is for registration, one's for disaster loan application. I forgot what the third one is, but it's you're on the wrong website. That's why.
Okay, sba.gov/disaster. I want to make sure everybody gets that. Other questions. Several people are asking to tell the loan interest rates again for business and nonprofits.
Okay, the fixed rate for business loans are 3.75%. That's for for-profit companies. For nonprofit companies, it's 2.25%.
Okay, 3.75 and 2.25. Will the collateral requirements include personal collateral?
Yes. They will take all available collateral. If collateral is available, I had a constituent this morning said, I own my house free and clear. I basically have no mortgage on it. I don't want to put a mortgage on it. Are they going to take my house as collateral? Yes, they will. It's a federal guideline. When you're borrowing money from the federal government, even during disaster, I'm sorry to say, but it is the federal rule. They have to take all available collateral. If it's available, the SBA is going to be required by federal law to take it. Are we still on?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Can child care providers such as licensed care facilities, family care homes qualify for this program?
If you're a for-profit entity, yes. We even had the conversation yesterday of Uber drivers or Lyft drivers, or if you are an independent contractor, if you are a business and not a quote unquote employee, if you're an employee, you have support through unemployment insurance. If you are an independent contractor and have not paid into the unemployment insurance fund, then basically you can petition and file an application for disaster loan relief.
Okay, what happens if we take a loan that isn't enough from your initial request? Can we request again?
Yes, I had stated that a little earlier. Say you basically calculated you need 250,000, and this thing extends beyond what anybody's expectations are. You can borrow up to the full $2 million limit. So you can go back to the application process and increase your loan, several times if you have to, up to the $2 million.
Okay. I think you sort of touched on this one, but I want to make sure we clarify. Can you explain the difference of application considerations between nonprofits and small businesses?
Well, nonprofit businesses are businesses that are either 501c3, 501c, the 501c businesses. They are not a for-profit entity. They're not a business that is set up to collect revenue, pay expenditures, and then retain the profit by the ownership. A nonprofit business is usually anything from a chamber to a altruistic outfit that's looking to has other social needs or means of why they're established. So a for-profit business very simply is a business that is controlled by an ownership and works for a profit for the ownership. A nonprofit has a completely different mandate.
Okay. If we are trying to refinance an SBA 504 building loan, will that interfere with this disaster funding?
No, it's two separate pots of money. If you're currently working with your lender or the certified development company to refinance, the certified development company portion or the first trust portion is a completely different set of circumstances. In that case, you're dealing with lenders and dealing with a completely different pot of money. With the disaster loan, you're dealing directly with the federal government, and the two do not mix.
Okay. Do your insurance funds have to be exhausted first before applying for the disaster loan?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure. I do not think so, because the insurance funds are not quote unquote revenue to the company. So my understanding is from filling out an application just previously, they're asking for the revenue, the operational revenue for the company. They're asking for the operational expenses of the company. The only other thing that comes into play is whether or not your business has the ability to get credit elsewhere. They'll ask you that question. You honestly have to answer it. So to say, if you want disaster loan funds because you have the better term, but you can go down to your neighborhood bank and get a $10 million or $1 million or $500,000 loan because of your credit relationship with that bank, then most likely you're not going to be eligible for SBA disaster loans. If you do not have that ability, which 9 out of 10 businesses don't, then you're going to be eligible. So the credit elsewhere is more important than whether or not you have insurance proceeds or anything. Nobody's asking you, like your unemployment office is asking you, are you making income by any other means beside your business at this point or having to do with your business? With the SBA disaster loan, we're just looking at what your obligations are, what your historic revenue has been, and what the drop-off, as you see it, is going to be because of the disaster.
Okay. We have Shondell Newsom on the line, and we're going to mute his line so he can ask his question. Hi, Shondell.
Hello, Shondell.
Hi, Shondell. Are you there? Okay, I think we might be having some technical difficulties. I'll go ahead with the next question that we have. As you said before, you can reapply over the disaster period, right? Could you apply, this question is, could you apply for the $25,000 for quick funding and then work on a larger loan with documentation?
Yeah, my understanding, I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Obviously, that hasn't come up circumstantial yet, as far as I know, but yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions? We have another one here. Okay, just got this one. Does this have anything to do with the comments the president made regarding making sure that businesses would be able to provide sick leave for their employees?
That came up in a conversation I had yesterday. I'm not quite sure. It's apples and oranges. My understanding was, and again, I'm not quite sure how they're going to cover that, if there is going to be some kind of bill that's gone through, through Congress that says, a business is going to afford sick leave for anyone who's sick up to 2 weeks. My understanding was, and this is not, my understanding was that there may be a payroll tax abatement or holiday to offset that cost, but at this point, I've not seen any bill. I haven't seen anything specific that says that is what's going to happen. So at this point, it's just been a conversation that's been had. It's been offered that it might be out there, but I have not seen the bill yet.
Okay. Next question is, my company is continually cash flow challenged. As a result, I have payment plans for my federal income taxes. Will this be a factor in a loan decision?
Well, the way the SBA normally works in situations like this, as long as you're on a payment plan, you're not considered in default, and therefore you're still eligible.
Okay. Next one, we completed the application this morning and did not see a place to request any specific amount. Did we complete the wrong application?
No, it's the correct application. I've heard that about half a dozen times already. My understanding is when you first submit that information, you're going to be assigned a case manager. That case manager will then speak with you directly, review what you've submitted, and that's where the determination is going to be as far as what the amount is going to be. So it's sort of like a two-step process. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Joe, can you define small business 1 to 100? What's the number?
Well, a small business is anyone who's not publicly traded, as far as I'm concerned, in the state of Nevada. My understanding is that the number is you should not exceed over 500 employees or a certain amount of net revenue or net income on a given year. I am completely remiss because almost every business I've talked to, 99.9% of them classify as small business. So I'm not quite sure what the exact number is, but I know the 500 or so number in employees, full-time equivalent employees, is sort of one of the key numbers. That is something I'll definitely look into, and I should have looked into it because it came up in another question. I haven't just had time to find out because it's an ever-changing number. But again, if you're not publicly traded, most likely you're going to pass the small business eligibility test.
Okay. Next question. Is there a cap for nonprofit funds available? We are a nonprofit 501c3, or is it $2 million as well?
It's $2 million as well, as far as I know.
Okay. How are these loans going to report on our credit reports?
As my understanding is, as the SBA or the federal government, I'm not sure which entity, it might be the U.S. Department of Treasury, will be your creditor, and it'll report as a normal credit instrument.
Is there an application cutoff date? We haven't been affected yet, but we see it coming.
I have a document here that says the application filing deadline is December 17th, 2020. So I think you have plenty of time.
And what if you are not approved? What are other options?
Well, the way we were instructed is that if for some reason you can't get approved through the loan disaster program, we are going to be working, and I've just reached out to all the banks this morning. We're going to be working with the lending institutions to sort of try to figure out a alternative way to fund somebody who may, for one reason or another, not fit the disaster loan portfolio, but may be eligible in other ways, or even eligible conventionally. So we're not just going to let anybody high and dry. If they have a legitimate reason why they still should secure the money, but for some reason the disaster loan program hasn't worked for them. We hear that's very remote, that situation. But again, if it does arise, we're already working on some alternatives with some of the area lenders.
Okay. Are there any closing costs associated with SBA loans?
My understanding for the disaster loan, there's zero cost involved. Unless you get somebody involved. Now, there are groups out there. We are actually talking to some large institutions that process applications like this on a regular basis. Unless you hire somebody independently, like a third party to help you in putting together the application and such, there's no cost involved whatsoever.
Okay. When do the loan repayments begin? Are they deferred for any period of time?
I believe that's in part of the process. Since I've not seen one disaster loan close yet, my understanding is that that's part in the closing process. That's how you're instructed. And I think the payments aren't immediate. I think they are deferred. I'm not sure how long they are deferred for, but I think there's an amount of time where there's either interest payments made only or deferred payments. Again, this is my first rodeo with disaster loans. It's something that I'm definitely writing on my list of questions to follow up on.
Okay, this person says, I'm trying to apply but received an identity verification error. Any idea why? Is the loan only available to business owner with an American citizenship?
No. If you are a legal entry into the United States, if you have a green card, you definitely are eligible for SBA funding. So I'm not quite sure what technical notice you're getting that's saying that the process is stopped for you. I'd have to know a little bit more information. I'll just let anyone who's on the line, and I know you're going to inundate my office, but if you have these kind of questions as a follow-up, I will give you the Nevada District Office's phone number. It's 702-388-6611. You could talk to any one of my staff members, and they can try to help you through the process as well. Please understand that we're probably taking hundreds of calls already, so we'll get back to you as soon as we can if we don't take the call immediately.
Okay. Can we keep you for just a few more minutes?
Absolutely.
We still have questions. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We still have questions coming in. Here's one. Is the program limited to keeping the business running only? For example, we have clients that are in the middle of improving their property and the cost of labor and materials has gone up due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Can they use the funds to cover the additional costs so that they can open their doors and also get additional working capital to operate for the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'm not sure because that's outside the scope of, I think, what's been outlined and why the proceeds should be used. Basically to take care of fixed obligations, take care of payroll, to keep the business active or prepared for when recovery begins, and other obligations, other liabilities or obligations that are necessary for keeping the business, either operational, semi-operational, or prepared. So, that might be outside the normal scope. What ODA told us simply was do not hesitate to apply, even if and it could be something you can call our office and maybe we can give you some further guidance. I'll have some of my people look up whether or not there's any restrictions on that. But for all intents and purposes, it doesn't hurt to apply. Now, if you don't have a history, if you're a completely new startup, still apply and still make the case. There are some addendum boxes there where you can put additional information or write additional information in there. It's going to be very, very important that you provide that information if your application is sort of out of the mainstream.
Okay, Joe, I think we have folks on there trying to fill out the form right now. So I got one question. Is the applicant the person or is it the company name?
It's going to be the business. There's that's the first page is asking for the business information. I think it's the second and third page that ask about the ownership. It is the business that's borrowing the money, not the person.
Okay. Is there a collateral requirement on a $25,000 or less loan since no docs are required?
Absolutely none. No collateral required for $25,000 or less.
Okay. Let's see. Let's say I applied for a $250,000 loan and it was denied. Can I go back and apply for 25?
That's a good question too. I don't know the answer. I would imagine, depending on why you were denied, the 250 might come into play. If it was an eligibility issue, the eligibility issue would still be maintained no matter what the amount was. Again, I'd have to, I would hope that that was not the case, that you're eligible. The amount that you, like I said, the amount that you arrive at is determined by you and your caseworker, from what we understand. So you put in your liabilities, you show that, hey, I've got $100,000 in obligations a month that I have to cover. They're going to extrapolate that to you can borrow up to 1.2 million. So that's sort of how it's arrived at. I'm not quite sure if you do apply and you are deemed ineligible, if you'd be even eligible for the 25.
Okay. To clarify about collateral, personal property, savings, and investment will be used as collateral as well. If you could just clarify that, Joe.
Well, normally what the SBA is looking for is tangible collateral. So it's usually, real estate. Sometimes there'll be, you also have to look at, if you have there's a liquidity test as well. If you're asking for $250,000 and you have $10 million in the bank, they're not going to approve your loan because they're going to say you have funds available elsewhere that you don't need disaster loan assistance. So what the hard collateral is normally what they're going to look at. If you have a piece of property, whether it's an investment property or a personal residence or something else that has that is worth X, and you don't have it leveraged already up and beyond 80%, they're normally going to look at that as collateral. The rule is to try to secure the loan with any available collateral. If you have no available collateral, they do not turn down the loan under the disaster loan program. But if you do have collateral, it's all going to come into consideration.
Okay. This question is, can we use a cosigner if credit is not good enough?
Yes.
Okay. Would our house need to be appraised when used for collateral?
I believe that there's going to be some kind of valuation of the house if it's going to be used as collateral. They may use what the tax rolls say as sort of an offset. My understanding is it's not an onerous process if they have to use the collateral. So again, it may be used. Again, I'm going through these for the first time. So under a normal circumstance, they could either use the appraised value that was recent. They could use the tax assessed value. But I'm not sure in this case how they would look at it. Possibly, but I'm not certain.
Okay. Obviously, this isn't a storm, as we know. So this question is: when filling out the application, it is requiring information on damaged property. How do you bypass this, or is it understood that despite the emergency is not a storm?
On the first page, you should have checked off economic injury. I do remember seeing with the applicants I was helping or sitting through and watching them that it did ask for that type of information. We just left it blank, and it allowed us to go to the next page. So I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Does the $8 million revenue SBA cap apply in this situation, or does yearly revenue not matter specifically for disaster?
I'm not quite sure that it is necessary. And you're saying $8 million. I think it's $8 million in net income. I don't think it's in revenue, because we have $30-50 million companies that have gotten SBA loans. So that's not the issue. I think it might be $8 million in net revenue. I think it does still come into play. Not quite sure. I definitely have to check on that as well.
Okay. We clearly have a lot of folks on the call, and they all have questions because we know how important it is. But I'm going to ask Dr. Brown, or Director Brown, I should say, at GoIT, if you have anything to add or any questions yourself.
I just want to say first, thank the Chamber. The state is going to be relying on the Chambers of Commerce to communicate to the business community, along with our Regional Development Authority partners. It's the most efficient way to do this. Want to thank Small Business Administration. They really helped us out over the weekend, and we were one of the first states approved for small business assistance, and I think at this point, maybe the only state approved statewide. These are difficult times, unprecedented times. We're going to continue to move forward with other matters, and we'll use this channel through the Chamber for official information as we have it. If there are roadblocks and troubleshooting issues that need addressed, my office here in Las Vegas, 702-486-2700. But that is for what people who need guidance. Like I had a dentist just call me about, what's the rules for dentistry on something like this. So that's for troubleshooting those kinds of issues. And again, I want to thank the Chamber and the SBA for putting this together today.
Well, thank you, Director Brown. We sure appreciate your help and your service to the state. And I want to thank again SBA District Director Joe Amato. I do have one last question, if I could get one more in. Joe, do you mind?
You 2 or 3. It's up to you. I'm fine.
Okay. Craig Stevens is asking to spread the word about Connect to Compete, and that would be Cox's free internet service to low-income kids. Are you aware of this one?
No, I have no idea.
Program. Yeah, if the schools stay closed and instruction goes online, we'll need to be sure that all kids have access. So I wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that program. It's very important as well. So sounds
like a great program.
Yeah, does anyone else have any other questions? I think that just about wraps it up. Okay, very good. Joe, we really appreciate your time. We really appreciate your service. And thank you to everyone who joined. And please feel free to use the Chamber as a resource. If you have any questions, as always, reach out to us at the Chamber or any of your Chamber organizations throughout the state. And of course, Joe has made himself available as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye.
Patty, the phone call is 8:30 every morning.
Unbelievable. The 2 critical calls are right at the same time. All right.
It says this one you're going to want to be on too.
Okay. You'll stick it on. Take care.